Andrew Carnegie was a Scottish immigrant and a complex industrial figure who became one of the most influential businessmen in American history. Andrew Carnegie, steel magnate and later philanthropist, was born in Dunfermline, Scotland on November 25, 1835. He came from a working-class family. He had a diminutive stature but an outsized personality. Carnegie's early years were marked by poverty and determination. His father, William Carnegie, was a handloom weaver who struggled as industrialization made his craft obsolete. His mother, Margaret Morrison Carnegie, was a strong-willed woman who would prove instrumental in shaping her son's ambition and character. The Carnegie family lived in a small cottage in Dunfermline, a town known for its linen industry. Young Andrew grew up watching his father's trade disappear as power looms replaced hand weaving. The family's economic situation deteriorated throughout the 1840s as Scotland underwent rapid industrialization. William Carnegie found less and less work, and the family faced increasing poverty. Margaret Carnegie took in work mending shoes to help support the family, but it was not enough. By 1848, the family's situation had become desperate. They made the difficult decision to emigrate to America, joining Margaret's sisters who had already settled in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh. The voyage across the Atlantic was difficult. The Carnegie family traveled in steerage, the cheapest accommodation available. They arrived in New York in 1848 and made their way to Pennsylvania. Andrew was 13 years old when he arrived in America, speaking with a thick Scottish accent and possessing nothing but his intelligence and determination. The family settled in a small house in Allegheny, and both Andrew and his father immediately sought work to support the family. Andrew's first job in America was in a cotton mill, where he worked as a bobbin boy, changing spools of thread on the spinning machines. He earned $1.20 per week for 12-hour days of monotonous labor. The work was tedious and exhausting, but Carnegie approached it with characteristic energy. He was determined to improve his situation and help his family escape poverty. Even as a young teenager, Carnegie displayed the ambition and work ethic that would define his career. After a year in the cotton mill, Carnegie found work in a bobbin factory where he tended a small steam engine and fired the boiler in the cellar. The work was slightly better paid but more dangerous. He lived in constant fear that the boiler would explode. However, this job taught him the basics of steam power and machinery, knowledge that would prove valuable later. During this time, Carnegie also worked as a messenger, carrying messages for the factory owner. This exposed him to the business world beyond the factory floor. In 1850, Carnegie's life changed dramatically when he secured a position as a telegraph messenger boy for the O'Reilly Telegraph Company in Pittsburgh. He earned $2.50 per week, more than double his cotton mill wages. More importantly, the job exposed him to the business community of Pittsburgh. As a messenger, Carnegie delivered telegrams to the city's merchants, bankers, and industrialists. He learned the layout of the city, memorizing the locations of businesses and the names of important men. He made himself indispensable by learning to recognize customers by sight and delivering messages with remarkable speed and efficiency. Carnegie's ambition drove him to teach himself telegraphy. He arrived early at the office to practice on the equipment before the regular operators arrived. He learned Morse code and mastered the telegraph key through sheer determination. His efforts paid off when he was promoted to telegraph operator, a position that required skill and offered better pay. As an operator, Carnegie had access to information flowing through the telegraph office. He learned about business deals, market conditions, and investment opportunities. This information would prove invaluable to his future career. In 1853, Thomas Scott, superintendent of the Western Division of the Pennsylvania Railroad, hired Carnegie as his personal telegrapher and secretary. This was the opportunity Carnegie had been working toward. Scott became Carnegie's mentor, teaching him about railroad operations, management, and business. Carnegie proved to be an exceptional student. He learned quickly and took on increasing responsibilities. Scott trusted him with important decisions and gave him opportunities to demonstrate his abilities. Carnegie's position with the Pennsylvania Railroad provided him with insights into the transportation industry that was transforming America. He learned about logistics, scheduling, and the complexities of managing a large organization. When Scott was promoted, Carnegie was appointed superintendent of the railroad's Pittsburgh division at age 24. This was a remarkable achievement for a young immigrant who had arrived in America just 9 years earlier with nothing. As superintendent, Carnegie proved to be an innovative and effective manager. He improved efficiency, reduced costs, and increased profits. He was not afraid to make difficult decisions or take calculated risks. During the Civil War, when Scott was appointed Assistant Secretary of War in charge of military transportation, Carnegie helped organize the Union's railroad and telegraph operations. He went to Washington and worked to ensure that troops and supplies moved efficiently to the front lines. This service brought him into contact with government officials and expanded his network of influential contacts. While working for the Pennsylvania Railroad, Carnegie began making investments that would form the foundation of his fortune. Scott had introduced him to the concept of investing, even lending him money for his first investment in Adams Express Company stock. This investment paid dividends that exceeded Carnegie's annual salary, teaching him a powerful lesson about the potential of capital investment. He began investing in railroad sleeping cars, iron works, oil lands, and other ventures. Each investment was carefully chosen based on his knowledge of industry and his assessment of future trends. Carnegie's investment in the Woodruff Sleeping Car Company proved particularly profitable. He recognized that as railroads expanded, passengers would demand more comfortable accommodations for long journeys. The sleeping car business grew rapidly, and Carnegie's investment multiplied in value. He also invested in iron bridges, recognizing that wooden railroad bridges would need to be replaced with stronger iron structures. His Keystone Bridge Company became one of the leading bridge builders in America. By the mid-1860s, Carnegie was earning more from his investments than from his railroad salary. In 1865, he resigned from the Pennsylvania Railroad to focus on his business ventures. He was 30 years old and already wealthy by the standards of the time. However, Carnegie's ambition extended far beyond mere wealth. He wanted to build something significant, to leave a lasting mark on the world. He would find that opportunity in steel. Carnegie's entry into the steel industry came gradually. He had been involved in iron manufacturing through his bridge company and other investments. He understood that iron was being replaced by steel for many applications. Steel was stronger, more durable, and more versatile than iron, but it was expensive to produce. The Bessemer process, invented in the 1850s, made steel production faster and cheaper, but American manufacturers were slow to adopt it. Carnegie saw the opportunity. In 1872, Carnegie visited a Bessemer steel plant in England and was amazed by what he saw. Molten iron was converted to steel in a matter of minutes rather than hours. The process was dramatic and efficient. Carnegie immediately grasped the revolutionary implications. He decided to build the most modern steel plant in America, incorporating all the latest technological improvements. In 1873, he founded the Edgar Thomson Steel Works near Pittsburgh, named after the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, one of his potential major customers. Carnegie brought the same energy and innovation to steel manufacturing that he had brought to his previous ventures. He hired the best technical experts, including Alexander Holley, America's leading expert on Bessemer steel production. He invested in the most advanced equipment. He focused obsessively on reducing costs and improving efficiency. Carnegie pioneered the use of detailed cost accounting in manufacturing, tracking the cost of every process and constantly seeking ways to reduce expenses. He drove his managers relentlessly to improve productivity. The Edgar Thomson Works began production in 1875, just as the country was emerging from a severe economic depression. While other steel makers struggled, Carnegie thrived by undercutting their prices. His efficient operations allowed him to sell steel at lower prices while still making a profit. He captured market share from competitors and established his company as a major force in the industry. When demand increased, Carnegie was positioned to dominate the market. Carnegie's business strategy was built on several key principles. First, he believed in vertical integration, controlling every stage of production from raw materials to finished products. He acquired iron ore mines, coal fields, limestone quarries, and railroads to transport materials. By controlling his supply chain, he reduced costs and ensured reliable access to resources. Second, he invested heavily in the latest technology, constantly upgrading his plants with new equipment and processes. Third, he hired talented managers and pushed them hard to achieve results, rewarding success and quickly replacing those who failed to perform. Carnegie was a demanding employer who expected total dedication from his managers. He paid them well but worked them relentlessly. He pitted them against each other, creating internal competition that drove innovation and efficiency. His partner, Henry Clay Frick, managed the day-to-day operations with an iron hand, crushing labor unions and maintaining strict control over the workforce. Carnegie himself spent much of his time traveling, maintaining business relationships, and planning strategy, while Frick handled the difficult task of managing the mills. The relationship between Carnegie and Frick was complex and ultimately troubled. Frick was a ruthless manager who had made his fortune in coke production before joining Carnegie. He was exactly the kind of hard-driving executive Carnegie needed to run his expanding steel empire. However, their partnership would be tested by the most controversial event in Carnegie's career, the Homestead Strike of 1892. The Homestead Steel Works was one of Carnegie's major plants, employing over 3,000 workers. The plant had a strong union, the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, which had negotiated favorable contracts with previous management. When the contract came up for renewal in 1892, Frick, acting with Carnegie's approval, proposed significant wage cuts. The union refused, and Frick prepared for a confrontation. He built a fence around the plant topped with barbed wire and hired 300 Pinkerton guards to protect strikebreakers. Carnegie was in Scotland during the strike, maintaining his custom of spending summers at his estate there. He left Frick in charge with instructions to break the union. On July 6, 1892, the Pinkerton Guards attempted to enter the plant by barge on the Monongahela River. Workers and their supporters met them with gunfire. A day-long battle ensued, resulting in deaths on both sides. The Pinkertons eventually surrendered, and the workers controlled the plant for several days until the Pennsylvania militia arrived and restored order. The strike was eventually broken, and the union was destroyed. The Homestead Strike was a public relations disaster for Carnegie. He was portrayed as a hypocritical plutocrat who preached democracy and workers' rights while crushing unions. Carnegie had written articles advocating for workers' right to organize and had presented himself as an enlightened employer. The violence at Homestead contradicted this image. Carnegie tried to distance himself from the events, claiming he had been unaware of Frick's plans, but few believed him. The strike damaged his reputation and revealed the harsh realities behind his industrial empire. Despite the controversy over Homestead, Carnegie's steel empire continued to grow. By the 1890s, Carnegie Steel Company was the largest and most profitable steel producer in the world. The company produced more steel than all of Great Britain. Carnegie's personal fortune grew to astronomical proportions. He became one of the richest men in America, perhaps in the world. His success was built on relentless cost-cutting, technological innovation, and ruthless competition. He drove competitors out of business or forced them to sell to him at low prices. Carnegie's competitive practices were controversial. He engaged in predatory pricing, cutting prices below cost to drive competitors into bankruptcy, then raising prices once competition was eliminated. He used his control of raw materials and transportation to disadvantage rivals. He made secret deals with railroads for preferential shipping rates. These practices were legal at the time but were increasingly criticized as monopolistic and unfair. Carnegie defended his methods as simply good business, but critics saw them as evidence of the dangers of unchecked corporate power. By 1900, Carnegie was ready to retire. He was 65 years old and had accumulated a fortune estimated at several $100 million. He had spent years writing and speaking about the responsibilities of the wealthy. In his famous essay The Gospel of Wealth, published in 1889, Carnegie argued that the rich had a moral obligation to use their wealth for the public good. He wrote that a man who dies rich dies disgraced. Now he wanted to put his philosophy into practice by giving away his fortune. In 1901, Carnegie sold his steel company to J.P. Morgan, who merged it with other steel companies to form United States Steel Corporation, the world's first billion-dollar corporation. Carnegie received approximately $400 million for his share of the company, making him one of the wealthiest individuals in history. He was now free to focus on philanthropy, which would occupy the remaining 18 years of his life. Carnegie's philanthropic activities were as systematic and ambitious as his business ventures had been. He believed that wealth should be used to provide opportunities for self-improvement rather than simply given away as charity. He focused on building institutions that would help people help themselves. His most famous philanthropic project was the establishment of public libraries. Carnegie believed that free access to books and knowledge was essential for democracy and individual advancement. He had educated himself through access to a private library as a young man in Pittsburgh, and he wanted to provide similar opportunities to others. Between 1883 and 1929, Carnegie funded the construction of over 2,500 libraries around the world, including nearly 1,700 in the United States. He provided the buildings on the condition that local communities would stock and maintain them. Carnegie libraries appeared in cities and towns across America, distinctive buildings that became centers of community learning. Many of these libraries are still in use today, bearing Carnegie's name and serving as monuments to his belief in the power of education. Carnegie also funded educational institutions. He established Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, combining the Carnegie Technical Schools with the Mellon Institute. He founded the Carnegie Institution for Science in Washington to support scientific research. He established the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace to promote diplomacy and prevent war. He built Carnegie Hall in New York City, one of the world's premier concert venues. He created numerous pension funds, including one for college professors and another for his former employees. Carnegie's philanthropy extended internationally. He built libraries in Britain and other English-speaking countries. He donated organs to churches. He funded the construction of the Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands, which housed the International Court of Justice. By the time of his death, Carnegie had given away over $350 million, approximately 90% of his fortune. The remainder was left to various foundations that continued his philanthropic work. Carnegie's personal life was marked by late marriage and family tragedy. He remained a bachelor until age 51, devoted to his mother who lived with him until her death. Shortly after his mother died in 1886, Carnegie married Louise Whitfield, a woman 22 years his junior whom he had courted for years. They had one child, a daughter named Margaret, born in 1897 when Carnegie was 61. Carnegie was a devoted father who doted on his daughter. His family life provided him with happiness and stability during his later years. Carnegie divided his time between his mansion in New York, his estate in Scotland called Skibo Castle, and travels around the world. He enjoyed entertaining guests, discussing ideas, and corresponding with world leaders and intellectuals. He wrote numerous books and articles on business, politics, and social issues. He became an advocate for peace and international cooperation, though his hopes for preventing war would be shattered by World War I. When World War I began in 1914, Carnegie was devastated. He had believed that economic interdependence and rational self-interest would prevent major wars between civilized nations. The war proved him tragically wrong. He tried to use his influence to promote peace negotiations, but his efforts were futile. The war broke his spirit. He became increasingly frail and withdrew from public life. His health declined steadily over the next several years. Andrew Carnegie died on August 11, 1919, at his summer home in Lenox, Massachusetts. He was 83 years old. The cause of death was bronchial pneumonia. Carnegie's death came just months after the end of World War I, a conflict that had shattered his faith in human progress. His funeral was a modest affair, as he had requested. He was buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in New York. Carnegie's legacy is complex and contradictory. He was a ruthless businessman who built his fortune through aggressive competition and exploitation of workers. Yet he was also a generous philanthropist who gave away his wealth to benefit society. He preached the gospel of wealth and the responsibilities of the rich, yet he fought unions and cut wages. He advocated for peace while profiting from industries that supplied materials for war. He championed democracy and opportunity while building a business empire that concentrated enormous power in his own hands. Modern historians have debated Carnegie's place in American history. Some see him as a robber baron who exemplified the worst excesses of the Gilded Age. They point to the Homestead strike, his monopolistic practices, and the harsh working conditions in his mills. Others view him as a captain of industry who helped build America's industrial might and then used his wealth for the public good. They emphasize his philanthropy, his contributions to education and culture, and his genuine belief in helping others improve themselves. The truth about Carnegie lies somewhere between these extremes. He was a product of his time, operating in an era of unregulated capitalism when business practices that would later be considered unethical or illegal were standard. He genuinely believed in the system that had allowed him to rise from poverty to wealth, and he wanted to create opportunities for others to do the same. However, his methods often contradicted his stated ideals, and the human cost of his success was substantial. Carnegie's impact on American society extends far beyond his steel empire. His philanthropic model influenced generations of wealthy Americans, from John D. Rockefeller to Bill Gates. The institutions he created continue to serve millions of people. Carnegie libraries remain community anchors. Carnegie Mellon University is a leading research institution. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace continues to promote diplomacy and understanding. These lasting contributions represent Carnegie's better angels, his genuine desire to use his wealth to benefit humanity. Perhaps the most fitting assessment of Andrew Carnegie is that he was a man of his age who both exemplified and transcended it. He was a ruthless competitor who showed little mercy to rivals or workers, yet he was capable of genuine generosity and possessed a sincere belief in human progress. He accumulated wealth through methods that were often harsh and exploitative, yet he gave most of it away to create opportunities for others. He was a walking contradiction, simultaneously embodying the best and worst aspects of American capitalism. In the end, Andrew Carnegie was neither a saint nor a villain, but rather a complex human being whose life reflected the contradictions of the industrial age. His legacy includes both the steel empire built on the backs of underpaid workers and the libraries that educated millions. He is remembered today for transforming American industry and for his unprecedented philanthropy. Whether one judges him more harshly for his business practices or more kindly for his charitable giving depends largely on which aspects of his life one chooses to emphasize. Carnegie himself would likely have accepted this ambiguity, for he understood that great achievement often comes with great cost, and that wealth carries both power and responsibility.